My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment. Do not rush past these words. There is a reason your eyes landed here today. Out of all the messages you could have seen, out of all the voices competing for your attention, something deeper guided you here. Something unseen has been waiting for this exact moment. And what you are about to hear may explain a confusion that has lived in your heart far longer than you realize. You have wondered why certain connections felt delayed. You have questioned why someone who seemed destined to understand you somehow misunderstood you instead. You have stood in silence asking questions that nobody around you could answer. Why did they pull away? Why did they become distant? Why did they seem convinced of things that were never true? Why did they look at you and see a version of you that never existed? Listen carefully, my child, because a hidden story has been unfolding behind the scenes of your life. Your soulmate thought they knew the truth about you. They believed they understood your heart. They believed they had figured out your intentions. They believed they had solved the mystery of who you were. But they were completely wrong. And what is beginning to happen now is something neither of you expected. For a long time they carried an image of you that was incomplete. Not because they were evil. Not because they wished you harm. But because people often see through the lens of their own wounds. A wounded heart rarely sees clearly. An afraid mind rarely interprets love correctly. Someone who has experienced disappointment often expects disappointment again. Someone who has been betrayed before may see betrayal where none exists. And your soulmate carried wounds they never fully healed. Wounds they rarely spoke about. Wounds hidden beneath smiles. Wounds buried beneath responsibilities. Wounds disguised as strength. The world looked at them and assumed they were fine. But heaven saw the cracks they worked so hard to conceal. And those cracks changed the way they saw you. What they thought was distance from you was often their own fear. What they thought was rejection was often their own insecurity. What they thought was your lack of interest was often their inability to believe someone like you could genuinely care. You never knew how much was happening inside them. You only saw fragments. You only witnessed pieces of the battle. The rest remained hidden. And because it remained hidden, confusion grew. Misunderstandings multiplied. Silence became louder than words. Assumptions became stronger than truth. Little by little, a false story began forming inside their mind. A story they started believing. A story that felt real. A story that seemed convincing. A story that whispered things like, "They don't really care. They have moved on. They never saw me the way I saw them. They don't understand me. They could never accept the real me." And once these thoughts took root, they began viewing every interaction through that distorted lens. Even moments that should have brought clarity created more confusion. Even signs meant to bring you together somehow pushed them further into uncertainty. But my child, what happens when a lie survives too long? What happens when an illusion stands for years without being challenged? Eventually truth arrives. And when truth arrives, it does not ask permission. It enters like sunlight through a crack in a dark room. Slowly at first. Then all at once. That is where this story begins to change. Recently, something unexpected started happening within your soulmate. Not outside them. Inside them. A shift. A disturbance. A feeling they could not explain. For reasons they could not fully understand, your presence began returning to their thoughts. Not once. Not twice. Again and again. During ordinary moments. During quiet nights. During conversations that had nothing to do with you. Your name would appear in their mind unexpectedly. Your face would emerge from forgotten memories. Your energy would surface without warning. At first they ignored it. They told themselves it meant nothing. They convinced themselves it was random. But the feeling refused to leave. The more they resisted, the stronger it became. The more they pushed away the thoughts, the more often those thoughts returned. Soon they found themselves revisiting old memories. Moments they had not thought about in months. Conversations they had forgotten. Details they once overlooked. And this is where something remarkable began unfolding. As they revisited those memories, they started noticing things they had missed before. Tiny details. Small moments. Subtle signs. Pieces of truth hidden in plain sight. Things that did not match the story they had been telling themselves. Things that challenged their assumptions. Things that made them pause. And every pause created another crack in the illusion. Every crack allowed more truth to enter. Slowly they started asking questions. Questions they had avoided for a very long time. What if I misunderstood them? What if I judged too quickly? What if I only saw part of the picture? What if there was more to them than I realized? These questions haunted them. Because once a person starts questioning a false belief, the entire structure begins shaking. And their structure is shaking now. More than they admit. More than anyone around them realizes. Some nights they lie awake replaying moments connected to you. Moments that suddenly look different. Moments that suddenly carry new meaning. Moments they once dismissed but can no longer ignore. The memory of your kindness. The memory of your patience. The memory of things you said. The memory of things you never said. The memory of opportunities that slipped away. All of it is returning. And each memory is carrying a message. A message that is becoming harder and harder for them to deny. You were not who they thought you were. You were never who they thought you were. The version of you they carried inside their mind was built from assumptions. The real you is something entirely different. And realizing this has created an emotional storm within them. Because understanding truth often requires grieving a lie. Think about that carefully. When someone discovers they were wrong about a person, they must face two realities at once. First, they must accept the truth. Second, they must confront the consequences of believing something false. That second part is often the hardest. Because it forces them to wonder what could have been different. What conversations never happened because of fear? What opportunities disappeared because of misunderstanding? What connection was delayed because of mistaken beliefs? And those questions are beginning to follow them everywhere. My child, there are moments when they suddenly become quiet for reasons nobody understands. Moments when they stare into space. Moments when they seem physically present but emotionally elsewhere. People around them notice. But they cannot explain it. Because how do you explain the realization that someone you thought you understood was actually far more beautiful than you imagined? How do you explain discovering that your assumptions were hiding a deeper truth? How do you explain the shock of realizing that a person you thought was distant may have been carrying feelings you never recognized? These realizations do not arrive gently. They shake foundations. They challenge identities. They rewrite stories. And that is exactly what is happening. The story they told themselves about you is being rewritten. Page by page. Memory by memory. Truth by truth. But this transformation is not happening all at once. There is still resistance. There is still fear. There is still uncertainty. Part of them wants to embrace the truth. Another part wants to stay comfortable inside the old narrative. Because old narratives feel familiar, even when they are wrong. Truth demands courage. Truth demands vulnerability. Truth demands change. And change is uncomfortable. Especially when the heart is involved. Especially when emotions run deep. Especially when the realization carries the possibility of regret. There is something they have not admitted to anyone. Not to friends. Not to family. Not even to themselves completely. The thought of you affects them more than they expected. Far more. What began as curiosity has become something else. What began as reflection has become emotional awakening. And this awakening is exposing feelings they thought had disappeared. Feelings they thought were finished. Feelings they believed belonged to the past. Yet here they are. Alive. Growing. Demanding attention. They keep trying to understand why. Why now? Why after all this time? Why are these emotions returning? Why does your energy still reach places within them that no one else can touch? The answer is simpler than they realize. Truth has its own timing. And some connections cannot remain buried forever. No matter how many distractions exist. No matter how many years pass. No matter how much distance appears between two people. Certain truths continue waiting beneath the surface. Waiting for the right moment to rise. And something has awakened that waiting truth. Something neither of you can fully see yet. Something moving quietly behind the scenes. Something larger than coincidence. Larger than chance. Larger than random timing. The signs have already begun. The synchronicities. The reminders. The unexpected memories. The strange feelings. The moments that seem ordinary yet carry unusual emotional weight. Your soulmate keeps encountering pieces of you in unexpected places. A song. A phrase. A memory. A familiar feeling. A conversation. A dream. And each encounter leaves them unsettled. Not in a negative way. In a revealing way. As though life itself keeps pointing toward something unfinished. Something unresolved. Something important. Yet the biggest revelation has not happened yet. Everything so far has only been preparation. Preparation for a truth that is much larger than they expect. A truth that will force them to confront something they have avoided for a very long time. Because misunderstanding you was only part of the story. The deeper issue was why they misunderstood you. And that answer reaches further into their heart than they are prepared to admit. Much further. The false beliefs they carried about you were connected to old fears they carried about themselves. That is the secret they are beginning to uncover. It was never only about you. It was also about what they believed they deserved. It was also about their hidden insecurities. It was also about the walls they built after previous disappointments. And once they fully understand that, everything changes. Because then they can no longer blame circumstances. They can no longer hide behind assumptions. They can no longer avoid responsibility. They must face the truth directly. And the truth standing before them is more powerful than they realize. My child, while they have been questioning old assumptions, another realization has quietly started forming. A realization that makes their heart beat faster whenever it appears. A realization they immediately try to push away. A realization that keeps returning anyway. What if the connection was real all along? Not imagined. Not exaggerated. Not one-sided. Real. That possibility terrifies them. Because if it is real, then everything changes. If it is real, then their previous conclusions were wrong. If it is real, then the distance between you was built on misunderstandings. If it is real, then they must decide what to do next. And that decision is approaching faster than they realize. Much faster. Even now there are moments when they feel an invisible pull guiding them toward answers. Moments when they feel compelled to revisit the past. Moments when they wonder whether reaching out would change everything. Moments when they imagine conversations that have never happened. Moments when they picture possibilities they once dismissed. These thoughts are becoming harder to ignore. And soon they may become impossible to avoid. But before that happens, another layer of truth must emerge. A layer so significant that it will challenge everything they currently believe. Because there is one memory. One specific memory. One moment connected to you. A moment they thought they understood completely. A moment they have replayed countless times. A moment that became one of the foundations of their assumptions. Yet that memory is not what they think it is. Not even close. The truth hidden inside that memory has remained concealed until now. And when it finally reveals itself, it will change everything. Not just how they see you. Not just how they see the connection. But how they see their own journey. The realization will arrive unexpectedly. Perhaps through a conversation. Perhaps through a sudden insight. Perhaps through a detail they previously ignored. But when it arrives, there will be no returning to the old story. Because the old story is already crumbling. The walls are already cracking. The illusion is already fading. And standing behind that illusion is a truth so powerful that even they are not prepared for its impact. Yet what they discover next. What they finally realize about that forgotten moment. And why it completely overturns everything they believed about you. Is only beginning to emerge. And when that revelation fully surfaces, my child, your soulmate will come face to face with a truth that could alter the course of both your lives forever. But that is where this message must pause. Stop scrolling once more. Do not leave yet. Because what is about to be revealed was hidden for far longer than either of you realize. Your soulmate has reached a place they never expected to reach. For so long they believed they understood the story. They believed they had already solved the mystery of what happened between you. They convinced themselves they knew why certain things unfolded the way they did. They thought they had all the answers. Yet now, my child, those answers are beginning to collapse. The memory I spoke of before has started returning to them with unusual force. It appears during quiet moments. It appears when they least expect it. It appears when they are trying to focus on something else. And every time it returns, another piece of the truth becomes visible. What once seemed obvious no longer feels obvious. What once felt certain no longer feels certain. And what they thought was the truth now feels like a puzzle missing half its pieces. At first they tried to ignore this feeling. They told themselves they were overthinking. They told themselves they were imagining things. They told themselves there was no reason to revisit the past. But the more they resisted, the stronger the realization became. Because truth has a way of knocking on the door repeatedly until it is finally acknowledged. And truth is knocking very loudly now. There was a moment connected to you that they misunderstood from the beginning. A moment that became the foundation for many of their assumptions. A moment they carried with them for a very long time. At the time, they interpreted it one way. But now they are beginning to see it differently. And that difference changes everything. They remember your words. They remember your expression. They remember the energy of that moment. Yet something feels different now. As if a veil has been lifted. As if they are watching the same scene but through clearer eyes. And suddenly details they ignored before are impossible to ignore. The kindness hidden inside your actions. The sincerity hidden behind your silence. The vulnerability hidden beneath your strength. The care hidden inside things they once dismissed. All of it is becoming visible. And every new realization creates another wave of emotion. Because the more clearly they see you, the more they recognize how wrong they were. Not wrong about everything. But wrong about the most important parts. Wrong about your intentions. Wrong about your heart. Wrong about what you truly felt. Wrong about who you really are. My child, this realization has not been easy for them. There are moments when regret rises unexpectedly. Moments when they wonder how many opportunities were lost because of fear. Moments when they question decisions they once defended. Moments when they replay conversations wishing they had responded differently. They rarely speak about this. Most people around them have no idea what is happening internally. Outwardly they continue living their life. They continue handling responsibilities. They continue moving through ordinary days. Yet beneath the surface an emotional storm is gathering strength. Because once someone realizes they misunderstood a soul, they begin questioning everything connected to that misunderstanding. And that is exactly what is happening now. The questions are multiplying. What if I judged too quickly? What if I never truly listened? What if I only saw what I expected to see? What if I pushed away something important? These questions linger long after the day ends. Sometimes they wake up thinking about them. Sometimes they fall asleep thinking about them. Sometimes they try distracting themselves only to find their thoughts returning right back to you. There is a reason for this. The connection has entered a new phase. A phase neither of you fully understand yet. For a long time, confusion created distance. Assumptions created barriers. Fear created silence. But those barriers are weakening. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But steadily. Every new realization removes another stone from the wall. Every moment of clarity opens another path. Every truth discovered weakens the power of the old narrative. And the old narrative is losing its grip. More quickly than they realize. Recently they experienced something that surprised them. A moment so small that most people would overlook it. Yet it affected them deeply. Someone mentioned a quality that reminded them of you. A trait. A characteristic. A way of being. And without warning they found themselves smiling. Not because they planned to. Not because they were trying to think about you. It simply happened. Naturally. Instantly. And that reaction startled them. Because it revealed something they had been trying not to acknowledge. Your presence inside their heart never disappeared. It merely became buried beneath confusion. But buried things are not always gone. Sometimes they are simply waiting to be uncovered. And something is uncovering them now. Bit by bit. Layer by layer. Memory by memory. My child, there is another truth they are beginning to face. One that is even more difficult than admitting they misunderstood you. They are beginning to realize how much they were influenced by outside voices. Opinions. Comments. Assumptions from others. The expectations of people who never truly understood the connection. At the time, those voices seemed reasonable. At the time, those voices appeared trustworthy. At the time, they accepted certain ideas without questioning them. But now they are looking back with new awareness. And some of those influences no longer make sense. Some of those opinions now seem incomplete. Some of those conclusions now feel painfully inaccurate. This realization creates another layer of discomfort. Because nobody enjoys discovering they allowed other people's perceptions to shape their own. Yet that discovery is necessary. It is part of the awakening taking place. The more clearly they see the past, the more clearly they see you. And the more clearly they see you, the harder it becomes to maintain the old story. There are moments when they wish they could go back. Not to change everything. But to look again. To observe more carefully. To listen more deeply. To understand what was truly happening. Because now they recognize something they missed. Something important. You were carrying your own struggles. Your own fears. Your own silent battles. Yet despite those battles, you continued showing strength. You continued moving forward. You continued offering kindness. And somehow they overlooked the significance of that. Now they see it. Now they understand. Now they recognize what was hidden in plain sight. And that recognition is touching parts of their heart they thought had gone numb. My child, there is a sacred reason this process is unfolding now instead of earlier. Timing matters. Growth matters. Preparation matters. Certain truths cannot be understood until the soul is ready to receive them. Had this realization arrived years ago, they might have rejected it. Had it arrived earlier, they might have misunderstood it again. But now something has changed. Life has humbled them. Experience has matured them. Challenges have softened certain defenses. And because of that, they are finally capable of seeing what was always there. Not perfectly. Not completely. But more clearly than ever before. This clarity is leading somewhere. It is not random. It is not meaningless. It is guiding them toward a crossroads. A decision point. A moment where they can no longer remain neutral. Because eventually understanding demands action. Eventually realization requires response. Eventually truth asks a question that must be answered. And that question is approaching. Closer than they realize. There are times when they imagine what they would say to you if they had the chance. The thought appears unexpectedly. Sometimes while driving. Sometimes while sitting alone. Sometimes in the middle of ordinary routines. Entire conversations begin playing inside their mind. Things they wish they had said. Things they wish they had explained. Things they wish they had understood sooner. And what surprises them most is how emotional those imagined conversations become. Far more emotional than they expected. Because deep down they are beginning to grasp the magnitude of what was misunderstood. They are beginning to see that this connection was never as simple as they once believed. There was more depth. More meaning. More significance. More potential. And realizing that has changed the way they think about the future. Yet one final barrier still remains. One final layer of fear. One final truth they have not fully accepted. They have accepted that they misunderstood you. They have accepted that old assumptions were flawed. They have accepted that their perspective was incomplete. But they have not yet fully accepted what that means. Because if they accept it completely, they must also face another possibility. A possibility that makes their heart race whenever it appears. What if you never stopped being important to them? What if all these years, beneath the confusion, beneath the distractions, beneath the silence, a part of their heart remained connected to you? What if the feelings they thought had faded never actually disappeared? What if they simply hid beneath layers of misunderstanding? That possibility frightens them. Not because it is negative. Because it is powerful. Because it carries consequences. Because it demands honesty. Because it could change everything. And my child, the closer they move toward this realization, the stronger the emotional pull becomes. They can feel it. Even if they cannot fully explain it. Something is shifting. Something is awakening. Something long dormant is beginning to breathe again. And just when they think they have reached the deepest truth. Just when they believe they finally understand what was hidden. A completely unexpected revelation is preparing to enter their life. A revelation connected not only to the past, but to something happening right now. Something they have not noticed yet. Something unfolding behind the scenes. Something involving information that has not reached them. Information that will force them to see the connection in a way they never imagined possible. And when that information arrives, my child, the emotional impact will be impossible for them to ignore. Because it will answer a question they have secretly carried for a very long time. A question they have never spoken aloud. A question connected directly to you. And when that answer finally appears, the next chapter of this story will begin.